So when you look at where we are today and you say, now, why are these guys so insistent on fighting Americans? Well, let me just repeat what was said 200 years ago. Taught by revelation that war with the Christians will guarantee the salvation of their souls, the Muslims, inducements to desperate fighting are very powerful. Yeah, but why did they attack the World Trade Center? Why fly those planes into the largest office building in the world where you have tens of thousands of civilians inhabiting that building? Why do that? Very simple. Taught by revelation that war with the Christians will guarantee the salvation of the souls, the Muslims, inducements to desperate fighting are very powerful. See, we think in terms of fighting war against military forces. They don't. They think in terms of fighting war against Christians. The war is Muslims against Christians, not military against military. That's the way Americans think. See, their thing is, hey, find a bunch of Christians, take them out, and if you get killed doing that, that's your straight ticket to heaven as long as you're taking Christians out. And by the way, in America, all these secularists keep saying, oh, no, we're not a Christian nation. Every other nation in the world believes America is a Christian nation except us. I mean, ask any Islamic nation, is America a Christian nation? And say, of course America is a Christian nation. So it's real simple. You attack America, you're attacking Christians, and if you get killed, that's a guaranteed ticket to heaven. Yeah, well, but why attack the Pentagon? Well, again, taught by revelation that war with the Christians will guarantee the salvation of their souls, the Muslims, inducements to desperate fighting are very powerful. Same answer answers every question. The same statement. You can use it again and again. And so people who say, well, we just need to sit down and negotiate and talk, and if we can just... No, that's like a Christian sitting down and having someone try to talk them out of going to heaven. You might do it. It's possible to do some occasions, but it's not very likely. So are we going to sit down with a different religion that believes the way to heaven is, now there's many ways to heaven for them, but a guaranteed way to heaven, I mean, the one way you can know for sure is to get killed in a holy war. And we're going to talk them out of their guaranteed ticket to heaven? Not likely. You see, that's why it did not work 200 years ago. It still doesn't work now. We negotiated, and finally said, all right, well, we got to do something different. And that's where Washington called for the military, and that's where we started using it. So when you look at where we are today, and one of the guys, by the way, who was run over by that 757 plane when it hit the Pentagon was Lieutenant Colonel Brian Birdwell. He was engulfed with jet fuel. He was set ablaze. He was a human torch, and amazingly, providentially, sovereignly, he survived that. 39 surgeries later, I mean, he was fried crisp. No skin left on his body, and just, I mean, in places there were, but generally it was burned clean off. And as you see him today, if you see him, he's got a great book. It's a book worth getting online and reading. It's Refined by Fire, Colonel Brian Birdwell. You see him, you look at him, he goes, yeah, I can see a little scar tissue around, but he looks pretty good. And then you read that his entire arm, from armpit to fingertips, is rebuilt and been grafted. His entire face, his ears, his eye sockets, his nose, all of that is reconstructed and grafted. I mean, there was nothing there. He was just fried. And so as he was overcome with that, he now has a wonderful testimony that he shares, and he's a strong Christian, strong believer, what God did on that day and how he managed to survive that. But Colonel Birdwell points out something that we often forget. War against terror commenced because of the attacks on the World Trade Center and the attacks on the Pentagon. When they flew those planes into these American buildings, we said, that's it, we're going to war. And we think that's what started it. But what we forget is that they had been attacking us for 30 years before that, and we were doing absolutely nothing to defend ourselves. Go back to 1979, the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, when they attacked and took the entire U.S. Embassy. And embassies are always considered home soil. They came onto American soil. When you step in a U.S. Embassy in any country, you've stepped onto American soil. If you step into the Canadian Embassy in the United States, you're on Canadian soil. If you step into Saudi Arabian Embassy in the United States, you're on Saudi soil. I mean, that is international law. When you step into an embassy, you're on American soil. And they stepped onto American soil, and they took the entire embassy. And so we didn't provoke that. That happened. Then you remember that 4 years later, the U.S. Embassy in Beirut was bombed. Now, I'm going to give you some figures of casualties here to remind you how many Americans were casualties. And this is not talking about all the nationals who live in those countries who were also killed and wounded. But in that 1983 U.S. Embassy bombing in Beirut, where the terrorists attacked Americans, 17 Americans were killed, 100 were wounded. And again, that is on American soil. That same year, you had the attack on the Marine barracks in Beirut, and that attack was 242 American dead, 81 wounded. You also had the next year, the U.S. servicemen were attacked in Berlin by those terrorists, the nightclub there in Berlin, and they killed 2 Americans and wounded 79 others. And now, not counting all the Germans that were killed and wounded, but this is just American casualties. Then in 1984, terrorists kidnapped and murdered Station Chief William Buckley. 1984, they attacked the U.S. Embassy Annex in Beirut. In that attack, there were 2 dead and 21 wounded, not counting all the others Lebanese that were killed. In 1984, the Muslims attacked the American Air Force Base in Torreon, Spain, killing 18, wounding 83 Americans. You may remember in 1985, the TW-8 flight 847. Famous pictures where that they found that American sailor on board and they clubbed him to death and threw his body out on the tarmac. Terrorists did that. We also had the 1988 Pan Am flight bombing over Lockerbie, Scotland. We had 189 Americans killed in that bombing. We had the first attack on the World Trade Centers in 1993. 6 Americans dead, 1,000 Americans wounded. We had the 1996 attack on the Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia. 19 Americans dead, 372 wounded. And again, not counting the Saudis that were killed in that attack. 1998 attack on the U.S. Embassy in Nairobi by Muslim terrorists. We had 12 Americans dead, 6 wounded. Simultaneous attack on the U.S. Embassy in Tanzania where they wounded 7 Americans. We had the attack on the USS Cole in Yemen, 17 dead. That was in 2000. 17 dead, 39 wounded. And then we had the 9/11 attacks where that we had 3,030 dead and 2,337 wounded. Now, if you look, and those are just some of the attacks. That's not all. It's been going for 30 years. But if you look over that period of time, America took about 10,000 casualties in that period of time. Dead, wounded, we took about 10,000 casualties and did absolutely nothing in that period of time. So here we are back to exactly what they said about us 200 years ago. The Americans are a feeble sect of Christians. You either have to fight well or pay well, and these guys don't fight well, so we'll just keep making them pay. We'll just keep taking lives. So attack after attack after attack after attack, and finally at 9/11 we said, okay, we're not playing this game anymore, and we suddenly went on offense. Now, all those other years we were on defense, we lost 10,000 American casualties. Now we go on offense. Well, we still took some casualties, so the question is not whether you're going to have casualties. You're going to have them whether you're on offense or defense. But now that we've been on offense, suddenly it's the fall of the Taliban, and you have an Afghan interim government, you have the Afghan Republic, you have the removal of Saddam. Libya decided to abandon its nuclear program because it didn't want to get invaded. You had interim government in Iraq, you had Karzai elected, you had Iraqi elections, you had the Iraqi constitutional vote, President Maliki. You get all these things that are happening now that were not there before. And the casualty numbers we have now are only about 1/3 of what we took in the 30 years before that. And we've actually been able to accomplish something. So Colonel Birdwell points out great stuff on that we forget all the attacks that have been going for years and years and years, just like it was in the American Revolution. Attacks for years and years, nearly 20 years before we finally did something about it back then. It's been going that way now. And Colonel Birdwell, as he looks at that region of the world where we're fighting right now, he likens it really to a swamp. And he says, he said you can either learn to live with the mosquitoes that come out of the swamp, or one day you can decide that you're going into the swamp to drain the swamp and permanently take care of the mosquitoes. And that's really what the war on terror is about. We've been living with mosquitoes that have been coming out of that swamp, and now we've decided, okay, we're going to go in and drain that swamp and take care of the mosquitoes so that we don't have to keep doing this year after year after year after year. Yes, there are American casualties, but there were American casualties before we ever started this thing. So as you look across the war on terror, you need to remember that when you see the perception on the media, that's just one side. I'll go back to Proverbs 18:17. He who states his case first seems right until someone tells the other side of the story and sets the record straight. So when you think about the war on terror, remember that there is not only another side than what the media gives, but there's also a historical side and a spiritual side that still are very applicable to our today in the war on terror. God bless you.